If you began to see central bank participation in the silver market, I think you'd see much more upside volatility.
And I think 2025 could be the year that silver, I'm not saying it's going to be silver's year, because I think going forward past 2025, we're going to have huge moves in silver and gold. But it could be the year that silver starts to take off and outperform gold. That's my forecast for 2025. I mean, gold and silver have been really steady, especially gold, since the beginning of the century. It's returned almost 10% a year, and this year it's returned like almost 3 times that.
Join our WhatsApp channel for real-time updates, breaking news, and expert predictions on gold, silver, and financial markets. Link in the description or pinned comment. Stay ahead of the curve. Don't miss out.
Silver's up 28.71%. Versus the dollar. So its performance has matched gold, which in my opinion is leaving a lot of room for silver on the upside. And I think 2025 could be the year that silver, I'm not saying it's going to be silver's year, because I think going forward past 2025, we're going to have huge moves in silver and gold. But it could be the year that silver starts to take off and outperform gold. That's my forecast for 2025. I'm sorry, I don't have exact price forecast. That's always very, very tricky. But as I said, they're going to continue, to sink the fiat currencies. And the only way you can measure fiat currencies is versus gold and silver. Some people might say, oh no, it's against Bitcoin. I'm sorry, it's not, because even though Bitcoin might go to 200,000 by the end of 2025, we could see it down to 40,000 before it gets there later on in the next few months. That's how volatile and dangerous it is. And I still think the base for savings, long-term savings, is physical gold and silver. But anyway, the exploration companies, they haven't even dug the gold out of the ground. They're not producing. It's more speculative. They're drilling to try to find the resources and hopefully developing their finds into a mine by selling to the bigger companies or trying to build it themselves. But the major mining producing companies, they're like a mint. They're going to be the next central banks, even though they're not central. They're going to be producing the reserves for the next, the new monetary system, in my opinion. It's not going to be the Bitcoin miners, right? And that's why the central banks around the world, outside the West, well, even in the West, countries like Poland, they're buying gold hand over fist because they know what's coming. This current debt-based system is on its last legs. So I'm trying to tell you that I think you need to be strong and believe in the fundamentals and not let change your path. And I mean, gold and silver have been really steady, especially gold, since the beginning of the century. It's returned almost 10% a year, and this year it's returned like almost 3 times that. Gold and silver been very boring, of course, if you compare it to this tech craze, this AI craze. I'm not saying AI is a bad thing, but I think people are getting ahead of themselves. So I've looked at some numbers today just to give you an idea of what's going on and what I think is going to happen in 2025. It's always tricky making predictions, but I'm going to make it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I'll admit it. But looking at where we are today, and I took these prices from 8 a.m. It's actually 20 past 8, but you have to take a price somewhere, even though the price of gold and silver, they trade almost 24/7. They're probably the most liquid metals in the world, I would say, because they're money. But anyway, back on the 29th of December, 2023, gold was fixed, AM fixing in London at 2,062.40. And For this exercise, I took gold at 26.5360, so up 28.66%. Yes, it's falling behind the tech space and Bitcoin. Am I concerned? No. I think it's a good thing. Gold and silver are still under the radar, nowhere near to being overbought. But even that I don't buy into. I think, unfortunately, our fiat currencies, they're going to continue to sink, and gold and silver are going to keep going up. Not because something new and special has been found about gold and silver, but it's because they've been around for thousands of years and people have always valued them. And when everything around you loses value because of the credit bubble unwinds, that's what happens. It's very simple. So in pounds, we closed the year last year at 1622. And right now, or a few minutes ago, we were at 2100. So that's a 29.47% rise. So you can see by that number there that the dollar is slightly higher, has outperformed the pound versus gold. So it hasn't been debased as much, but very, very little difference. But the currencies that have done really badly are the euro and the Swiss franc in terms of the major currencies. I haven't looked at the yen, but it's even worse.
If you began to see central bank participation in the silver market, I think you'd see much more upside volatility. Traditionally, silver has been of less use to central banks because, among other things, borrowing secured by silver on global markets hasn't been as generous or well established as the utilization of gold for collateral, as an example. Traditionally, the central bank's motivation has been as a store of wealth and a medium of exchange rather than for speculative purposes. Natives, just brutal speculative purchases. Right. It may be that Mr. Putin has observed the upside volatility of silver relative to gold.
2024 has been a strong year for silver, with many experts predicting it will continue to outperform gold in 2025, despite the potential slowdown in industrial demand due to a U.S. recession. Silver has consistently attracted attention from investors, especially when the broader precious metals market begins to rally. This trend is often fueled by silver's lower price and higher volatility, which makes it more appealing to retail buyers and emerging markets. According to Rick Rule, while silver's performance is often tied to gold's momentum, it gains significant traction as general investors look for more affordable ways to enter the market. Recently, silver received a major boost with Russia's announcement that it plans to add significant amounts of silver to its financial reserves. Historically, Russia, like China, has been a big buyer of gold, and while silver wasn't initially on the radar, this shift is seen as a potential game changer. Russia's decision to stockpile silver comes as part of its broader strategy to diversify away from the US dollar and other global financial systems, particularly after being isolated by sanctions. This move could signal a larger shift in how central banks view silver, with more institutions potentially adding it to their reserves. Rick Rule remains cautious, noting that silver has traditionally had a limited role in central bank holdings compared to gold. However, Russia's recent move suggests that silver's status in the global market could undergo a major transformation. If other countries follow Russia's example, we could see unprecedented volatility and price surges in the silver market, changing how silver is valued in the years to come. Now we present the clips of Rick Rule's insights from his recent interview. Before we continue to discuss this, please subscribe to our channel and activate the bell icon for timely updates.
My prognosis for silver has more to do with my experience, my observation. I don't, and I don't know anybody who does, really truly understand the silver market in terms of the why. I've been trying for 45 years. But what I do know how to do is observe. And my observation tells me that precious metals bull markets are led by gold. And when the generalist investor begins to be attracted to the precious metals narrative, normally because of the momentum established by gold, when that generalist investor comes into the metals market, leadership in the market transfers from gold to silver. So that transfer seems to take place sort of halfway through a bull market. And we haven't seen the transfer come to silver yet. And I don't know why the transfer does. I assume because of the reputation that silver has for more volatility, which attracts the greed buyer, and also for the lower unit cost, which attracts retail buying in emerging and frontier markets from holders who are unable to store wealth in gold. As I say, I don't know why it happens. I just know that it happens. The last to move traditionally have been the higher quality silver equities. And my observation has been that there is not enough market cap in that category to stand the inflow of generalist money when it happens. So the upside that occurs in the higher quality silver stocks is absolutely insane. To illustrate that, my first bull market was the 1970s, and I watched, but sadly didn't participate. As an example, Coeur d'Alene going from 10 cents to $65. Not a typo. In the market in the early part of the 90s, I did participate. We financed Silver Standard at 72 cents. In 6 years, it was over $40. We financed Pan American at 50 cents. In 6 or 7 years, it was over $40. The upside that people who have the patience and the stomach to endure the volatility, the upside in the high quality, small silver equities is stunning. It isn't for people who aren't willing to hold a stock over a long weekend. You know, the narrative is a long-term narrative, and if you apply short-term tactics to a long-term narrative, you are your own victim. And I don't know if this is going to occur in a year or 2 years or 3 years. I don't even know that it's going to occur. I just know it's occurred 4 times before in my career. And the outperformance of silver and the silver equities relative to gold when the narrative comes into precious metals is truly spectacular. The fact that President Putin, or for that matter, President Trump says something, doesn't make it true. The cynical side of me says you can tell that politicians are lying when their lips are moving. We haven't seen any evidence of Russian participation, Russian central bank participation in the silver market, although it's possible that they're merely buying Russian production. If you began to see central bank participation in the silver market, then I think you'd see much more upside volatility. Traditionally, silver has been of less use to central banks because, among other things, borrowing secured by silver on global markets hasn't been as generous or well established as the utilization of gold for collateral, as an example. And traditionally, the central bank's motivation has been as a store of wealth and a medium of exchange, rather than for speculative purposes. Natives, maybe that Mr. Putin has observed the upside volatility of silver relative to gold and has decided that he's a good speculator and that he should allocate the commonwealth of Russians to assets that he believes are going to go up in price. This has not traditionally been a central bank activity, but he's certainly not a traditional politician. We're a highly competitive society, but we aren't yet winning the race to the bottom. The Europeans are more efficient at debasing their currencies than we are, as are the Japanese, as are the Chinese, as are the Canadians, as are the Australians. I think we'll continue as the world's reserve currency, and I think that our currency will likely outcompete a composite basket of other currencies. I think there will be periods of time when other currencies are oversold relative to the US dollar. And I think that there will be opportunities for diversification for American investors into other currencies. But in direct answer to the question that you asked, I'm 71 years of age. I expect that the US dollar will be the world's reserve currency for the rest of my life. And for the record, I'm pretty healthy. And I think that on balance, if you compare the US dollar to other currencies, particularly the euro, that the US dollar will continue very strong. I think that rather than seeing a real BRICS currency, what you will see is a settlement mechanism outside of the US dollar for bilateral trade among countries that have learned that they can't trust the US. The Russians, certainly, who were victimized by our stealing $300 billion worth of their treasury securities. whether or not you agree with their moves in the Ukraine, we did steal $300 billion worth of their assets, which doesn't engender trust. And nations that are concerned about the politicization of the SWIFT banking system, the ability of the US dollar to affect extraterritorial policy through US dollar exchange mechanisms. I think that you'll see bilateral relationships outside the US dollar. And I think that ultimately those flows will ironically settle in US dollars after the fact. I hope that helps.